Hi everyone, it's Teacher Kayla. I wanted to read you guys a book today. And this book is a book that I read all the time when I was little, like you guys, like your age. And it is called The Tiny Little House. And it's a tiny book too. And I have a list of words for you to hunt for, to listen for while I'm reading. And while I'm reading, and anytime you hear any one of these words, you can raise your hand and say, "Oh, I heard it, a keyword." Or touch your nose or tap your head every time you hear it. And then maybe mom and dad can help you make a little checks or tallies every time you hear a keyword. And then at the end, maybe you can try writing them or spelling them. So here they are. Every time you hear the word house or little or live or door, those are the keywords to listen for while I'm reading. Okay, so here we go. The Tiny Little House. Written by Eleanor Clymer, drawings by Ingrid Fetz. And I'll try and show you the pictures as best I can. Here's the first picture. Squeezed in between two big houses on a city street stood a tiny little house. Its little windows were dusty, its walls had no paint, its door was locked. Long ago, it had stood by itself in the middle of a garden. A family lived in it, but the city grew up around it. Men came and built a big building on one side of it, and then they built a big building on the other side, and the little house was squeezed in the middle. There's the tiny house squeezed. Years passed. The family was gone. The little house stood empty. Nobody lived in it. Nobody cared about it. Nobody wanted it at all. Nobody but Alice and Jane. Alice lived in one of the big buildings next door, and Jane lived in the other. They were friends. On their way to school, they peered through a dusty window. Why doesn't someone live in it? Jane wondered. It's such a nice little house. I guess nobody knows it's here, said Alice. Nobody but us, said Jane, and Mrs. O'Brien. Mrs. O'Brien was a little old lady who lived next door to Alice. Every day she went out with a basket on her arm, and every day she stopped to look at the little house, just as Alice and Jane did. They wondered what she had in her basket and why she peered at the little house. But Mrs. O'Brien never told them. She just smiled and hurried away, and the little house stood empty. Then, one day, when the girls were coming home from school, they saw that the landlord had unlocked the door. A short, fat lady and a short, fat man were trying to squeeze themselves inside. Look, said Alice, someone's gonna live in it. But nope, the fat lady shook her head. This won't do, she said. But it's such a nice little house, said the fat husband. Well, what use is it when we can't even get inside? Asked the fat wife. Why, it isn't even big enough for one of us. And they went away. Again, the little house stood empty until one day 2 more people came. They were tall and thin. They bent their heads and went inside. This won't do, said the tall, thin husband. But think how low the rent is, said the tall, thin wife. Well, what's the use of low rent when the ceiling's even lower? Asked the husband. Why, we would knock our heads every time we stood up straight. And they went away. At last 2 people came who were neither fat nor tall. This is just right, said the husband. I can play my fiddle and you can play your harp, and we won't bother anyone. But the wife shook her head. Don't you see? The fiddle and the harp won't even go through the door. So they went away. The little house grew dustier every day. The mice danced on the floor at night. The dust danced in the sunbeams by day. When the lights were lit in the other houses, the windows of the little house were dark. The man who cleaned next door kept his mops and pails and brooms in it, and that was all. Summer came and the streets were hot. Trucks and cars roared by. Men and women with drills dug up the street and made clouds of dust and a terrible noise. Alice and Jane stood in front of the little house. If only someone would just use it, said Jane. Someone not too big and not too small. But who? Well, why not us, said Alice. But it's locked, said Jane, and we can't get in. Let's pretend we can, said Alice. She put her hand on the door and turned it, and the door swung open. The man who cleaned forgot to lock it. Let's go in, said Alice. She was brave. Jane was not so brave. Can we? She asked. Come on, said Alice. Inside, it was cool and quiet. The noise of the street seemed very far away. They were in a little sitting room. It was empty except for some mops and pails and brooms. They tiptoed around and saw a little kitchen and a tiny little bedroom. It's lovely, sighed Jane. If only we could have it. Let's pretend it's ours, said Alice. But the little house was so dusty. Let's clean it up, said Jane. They got to work. They took the brooms and mops that the cleaning man left. They swept the floor, they scrubbed the kitchen, they washed the windows. Oh, that's better, said Alice. But the little house needed furniture. But what could they use? Out in the backyard, they found some boards and boxes and they dragged them inside. This box will be the table, said Alice, and these can be our chairs. But what about a bed? Let's run home and get some things, said Alice. She ran to her house and gathered up some cushions. Where are you going with those cushions? Her mother asked. I'll take good care of them, Alice answered as she dashed out the door. Jane took her doll's dishes and a tablecloth. Where are you going with that tablecloth? Her mom asked. I'll bring it back soon, Jane promised. They put the cushions in the bedroom. This can be the bed, Alice said. They put the tablecloth and the dishes on the table. Then Alice looked out in the backyard again. Someone had thrown away some paper flowers. And here's a nice old milk bottle to put them in, she said. Now our house looks even better, said Jane. We're ready for company. Then they looked at each other. But it isn't really our house, said Jane, and we can't stay in a house that belongs to someone else. I know, we're just pretending, Alice said. They felt sad. Pretending is fun, but sometimes you have to stop. Just then, Alice noted someone was looking in the window. It was Mrs. O'Brien. She can be our company, said Alice, and she opened the door. How do you do, she said, as her mom did when company came. Won't you come in? Oh, thank you, said Mrs. O'Brien. I was just passing by and I thought someone had moved into this little house. It looks so clean. We're just pretending, Alice explained, but you can come in and sit down if you like. Well, maybe I will. I've walked a long way and I am tired. This is the best chair we got. I'm sorry it has no back, Alice said. And these are our dishes. I'm sorry we have nothing to eat. Oh, but I have, said Mrs. O'Brien, and she opened her basket. It was full of cookies. There were sugar cookies, chocolate cookies, peanut butter cookies. They smelled delicious. Have some, said Mrs. O'Brien. They're good, the girls mumbled with their mouths full of crumbs. Have some more. I made them myself, Mrs. O'Brien urged them. But where were you going with your basket full of cookies, Jane asked. I was trying to sell them, Mrs. O'Brien told her, but I haven't sold very many, and I'm tired of walking. I wish we could help you, said Jane. Suddenly, Alice jumped up. Oh, we can! You can use our house! Use this house? What do you mean? You could use it for a shop. Yeah, of course, agreed Jane. Alice took some paper and made a sign that said, cookies for sale, very good ones. She put the sign in the window, then she spread the cookies out on the tablecloth. Soon some people came. First there were 2 boys with a wagon, and then a girl who was minding her little brother. Where are the cookies? They asked. Right here, 2 cents each, said Alice. Then she turned to Mrs. O'Brien. Is that right? 2 cents will be fine, said Mrs. O'Brien. Soon most of the cookies were gone. I see I'll have to make some more, said Mrs. O'Brien. But then something happened. A big angry man came in. It was the landlord. What's going on here? He demanded in a loud, angry voice. Who are you and what are you doing in my house? I'm Mrs. O'Brien, said the old lady. I live next door. She looked very scared. Well, you can't stay here. Out. Everybody out, said the landlord. Yes, we were just going, said Mrs. O'Brien, gathering up her things. The children looked frightened too, all but Alice. Alice was brave. Well, you never use this house. Nobody wants it. Nobody cares for it, so we made it into a cookie shop. A cookie shop? Well, you must pay me rent. Oh, said Alice. She forgot about rent, but now Mrs. O'Brien felt brave. Maybe I could pay rent if I sell some more of my cookies, she said. There is a kitchen, said Jane. You could make them right here. No, said the landlord. Why not? I think it's a great idea, Alice said. Well, what if nobody buys the cookies? The landlord asked. Then how will Mrs. O'Brien pay the rent? Jane felt so scared that she wanted to run away and hide. She was not brave at all, and the man was so big and scary. But this was no time to hide. Something had to be done, and suddenly she knew what it was. She took a sugar cookie, held it up to him, and said, "Taste it." He said as he chewed. Now taste that one, said Jane, holding out a chocolate cookie. Said the landlord. Now try this one, Jane ordered, giving him a peanut butter one. They're all gone, said Jane, looking into the basket. The landlord scratched his chin. Well, all right. You can try it, but save some cookies for me. I'll make a special batch just for you, said Mrs. O'Brien. In fact, I'll start right now. I'll go home and get my pans and flour and butter and everything I need. We'll help you, said the boys with the express wagon. We'll all help, said Alice. You could even live here, said Jane. Could I? Mrs. O'Brien asked, looking at the landlord. Why not? He said, smiling at her. Somehow when he smiled, he didn't look quite so big and scary. And now the little house has someone living in it. At night, when the lights are lit in the other houses, its little windows have lights too. Its door is painted, and over it is a sign that says, "The Little Cookie Shop." The end. Thanks for listening. Tomorrow we can talk, and you can tell me how many words you found, and maybe we could talk about the book. All right. Bye.